What's up, everybody? Welcome to Wise Guy Gazette. Today I'm going to be talking about some of my cameras and comparing and contrasting from DSLRs all the way down to 1-inch sensor compact, so it's going to be a fun one. Alright, I'm going to move on to the Fujifilm X-T20 now. So like I said, I believe the newest camera in the whole lineup is 2017 was the release date, and I believe this is a 2017. So I think I bought this one just after I purchased the GX9 that I'm filming on right now. And, you know, I was kind of torn between Micro Four Thirds, which is my normal kind of native system for the last, I'd say, 5 or 6 years. I was kind of torn between that and moving up to an APS-C system. So I was kind of mulling over it, and I decided to buy an X-T20, which was a kind of a comparable body to, you know, the GX9 and the EM5 too, which I'll talk about in a second. This was a really good body to kind of as an entry point, in my opinion, because it was small. I wouldn't say cheap. It was one of the more expensive used purchases I made out of these cameras. As you've seen, like, these compacts are in the $200, $300 range. This was maybe $600 with no kit. So it was not an easy expense, but I did find that it was really valuable because what I found was I like having the Fujifilm in the lineup. You know, I love this camera for the controls. You know, it has the manual controls, the feel, the colors. Like I said, I'm not a snob, but it does create good JPEGs. And the Canon, although you can do those picture styles, as I mentioned, they're limited to 3. There's way less of a market for, you know, aftermarket styles and recipes, so to speak. Yeah, so I really do enjoy the Fuji for a lot of things. And it's, of course, a beautiful body. It's built really well. So it's not something that I wanted to get rid of. But what it did teach me is that, you know, the sensor size difference between Micro Four Thirds and APS-C doesn't really personally matter to me. And that could be different for everybody. But, you know, 2/3 of a stop-ish of dynamic range and noise performance. I saw some difference in certain situations, difficult lighting, but to be honest, because the lenses are cheaper on Micro Four Thirds, I'm usually shooting with faster lenses than what I could afford for Fujifilm. So I think the difference in low light performance was almost washed by the faster lenses on Micro Four Thirds. So not that, you know, Fuji is not a good system. I do have, you know, the 50 f2, 18 f2, a 27 f2.8 from, it's a third party, maybe TT Artisans. I'll have to check that, but I have a couple lenses. I have the 18 to 55 2.8 kit lens. I have a 55 to 230, a long kit lens as well. So I have a couple lenses for it. I use it a lot, and I think it's probably my highest megapixel body, tied with the Nikon, which is a DSLR, so I don't really use it as much. But if I want high res, if I want the good colors, I still use it, you know, a decent amount. But as you can see by, you know, I'm filming on the GX9 and I have this EM5 too still. I am a primarily Micro Four Thirds user still, and I have way more than I just named in lenses for Micro Four Thirds. So it didn't switch me over to a different system, but it kind of got me on a dual system path, which is cool. So when I see online, you know, Micro Four Thirds isn't going to do it, you need APS-C or you need full frame, I can kind of evaluate, and I know personally for me that it wasn't too big of a deal and it didn't make a big difference in my work. So, and when I say work, you know, I'm purely a hobbyist, so take that with a grain of salt. I'm not a working professional. My opinions are just based on like daily usage and kind of getting a feel for these cameras. But like I said, I do use these cameras. I mean, these are used cameras. I've had most of these for at least like 3-4 years. So this is long-term experience. Yeah, and actually one more thing I wanted to touch on with the Fujifilm is, although these dials are awesome, I think it's really fun to shoot that way. I think a lot of people will agree that the twin like front and rear wheel setup where they're not marked and they're just digital wheels, I think it's faster for most types of shooting. You're not going to be able to check your exposure before you shoot or anything like that, but I feel like you just have those two dials, especially if you're an aperture priority. You have exposure, comp, aperture. It's just really quick and easy versus, and it's one-handed. So otherwise you have to, on Fuji, you'd use aperturing with your left hand. You'd operate, you know, shutter speed up here and then exposure comp. And this is another controversial thing. I do have a GX9 as my main Micro Four Thirds body, but I don't like dedicated exposure comp wheels, or I'd say I don't like using them that much. I'm fine with it having it, but I'd rather just use a jog wheel or a top or front control wheel. And the reason being just because they're easier to operate. Like the physical resistance is less. And I like being able to just quickly jog through exposure comp and aperture right there. I just find it easier. So really good body, still kind of a niche usage type thing, but it gave me a taste of Fuji and APS-C. And when I say that, I mean, I came from APS-C to Micro Four Thirds, but it gave me a taste of mirrorless APS-C. And, I hadn't shot APS-C since the D7100, which I'll talk about. So it's kind of a good experience, and I really do like that body. Moving on, I'm going to look at one of the all-time classics in my collection. That's the OMD EM5 Mark II. And this is the last EM5 before they switched to a plastic body. It's, in my opinion, again, I'm going to make the same type of case as the M2 here. For me, at least, it's the best in the OMD EM5 lineup. And the reason being is it gets a lot of the newer features and gets a lot of things right over the original, which I also owned. But it still has the metal tank-like body. It's just built like a classic Olympus. And you'll know what I mean if you've owned different Olympus cameras over the years. This XZ2 is built really well. If you're taking the D71 out of the equation, this is the best built by far. Like, this is a total brick. And that's why I would argue it's my favorite in the EM5 series. You still are stuck on the 16 megapixel sensor, same as the original, but they made so many improvements across the ergonomics and user interface board that I feel like it totally redeems itself and is a huge, huge improvement from the original EM5, which, like I said, I also owned for years. I'm just going to kind of run through what makes this one so special to me. It's the first Micro Four Thirds camera I got that was truly like a usable, modern, mirrorless camera. It operated fast. It had controls that were really ergonomic. The image quality was great, of course. And it just felt like, this is the future. I'm going to switch to mirrorless. This was my camera. So I was kind of on the fence. I had the original EM5 in silver. Beautiful camera, by the way. There's certain things like, holding it didn't have any grip whatsoever. The wheels were kind of weird. They felt cheap, but kind of maybe too metallic at the same time. They just didn't have a good feel. They weren't consistent from the front wheel to the back wheel, which bothered me. And the camera just was hard to hold and shoot. But it was a really beautiful camera. It shot well, reasonably fast for the time. I think actually Micro Four Thirds, they were ahead of the game, so to speak, in the mirrorless market. So these were considered fast cameras at the time, and the EM1 even more so. For me personally, the EM1 was a little bit too much. It was too close in size to the DSLRs I was replacing, so it wasn't as compelling for me when I was starting my mirrorless collection, but this was kind of the perfect size. So the EM5 has always been my series. I did switch to Panasonic, back and forth, Olympus, Panasonic. I just generally like both companies, and I do like what they offer kind of under different styles. So the GX9 is my current, I'd say, everyday camera, but this one gets a lot of use as a wildlife camera because the stabilization's like, I don't know, on paper I think they're similar, the GX9 and the EM5 II, but the EM5 II is just better in my opinion. It just works better, especially with long lenses if you don't have sync stab or dual IS. So I use it with long lenses. The grip is more comfortable than the GX9 for me with this half case. It honestly like kind of fits my hand like a glove. It does have the flippy screen, which the GX9 doesn't. It has a better viewfinder than the GX9. So in some ways it's like I upgraded to the GX9, but I still in some ways love the EM5 II, what it offers as well. So I did keep it. I think they're both very viable. If this body ever got the 20 megapixel sensor, which it never will because it's, they switched to the plastic, the OM5 body, that would be the ultimate Olympus camera for me. That would be, or even the 25 megapixel, the new sensor would be even better. But the EM5 Mark II is a better body than the EM5 Mark III and the OM5, in my opinion. I like the metallic body. It's built like a tank. You don't get those tripod mount issues. I know some of that could have been user error, but people did have the tripod mount rip out of the bottom of the plastic bodied EM5 series. So this is a cult classic. I know a lot of other people agree with me. This is truly one of the this is a game changer for Olympus and for Micro Four Thirds. This was a truly compact, viable, fast, good mirrorless camera, and was truly like competitive with the Sonys and other larger sensor compacts at the time. So definitely one of my favorite. And then the last one I'm going to talk about is the DSLR. This is a D7100. Yeah, I mean, it feels weird holding this. I mean, I haven't shot with the DSLR I haven't shot with the DSLR as my main camera since I bought the EM5 II. And like I said, that was a game changer. It fully switched me over to mirrorless, and that was probably around 2016, 2017 maybe. It feels kind of alien to me, but in some way it's really comforting to feel that, beefy grip, optical viewfinder. D7100 is a classic Nikon as well. It has the 24 megapixel sensor, and it was kind of like, as far as I was concerned, the D7000 series was one of the best sensor options for the price at the time. So you're getting a really, really, really good performing sensor. I'd say honestly, I could check DxO Mark, but this performs probably better than the EM5 Mark II, probably similar to the GX9, a little worse than the Fuji X-T20, I'd say. I use cameras that are worse performing in terms of raw sensor performance than this, mostly just because this is too big for the type of shooting that I do normally. So I like to just do travel photography, street, a little bit of just keeping it on me wherever I go and capturing the moment. And so obviously this is not compatible with that. But otherwise, great camera, not something that we're going to get rid of, and definitely a cornerstone of the collection, and kind of not what got me started. Nikon DSLRs in general are what got me started. So, a D300, a D200 before that, and then Fujifilm used to rebrand Nikon DSLRs, so I had one of those before. So my first digital cameras were Nikon DSLRs. So this one directly replaced the D300, and it was a worthy replacement. One of the reasons why I love the D7000 series was it's like a prosumer body, but it had the screw drive for the autofocus on older Nikon lenses. So at the time, I was pretty budget conscious, so I would buy Tokina and Tamron and other aftermarket, third-party autofocus lenses that only work when you have a focusing motor in the body of the camera. And so the D300, D200, the prosumer level series had those, and the D7000 was, I believe, the lowest level series that you can get that could drive those lenses. So that was kind of a big reason why I chose that as well. Some of my favorite lenses at the time were the Tokina. I think it's a 28-70, and there's also a 24-70 f2.8 constant Tokina, and that's a really good design standard zoom. And then they have a 70 or 80-200 f2.8, and so I had that as kind of my standard zoom setup. And so I was, sporting a massive camera and taking it for I would do a lot of auto shows and just still travel stuff. But back in the day, there's no other option in terms of size. So I just kind of worked with what I had. But now I'm really happy that I can do exactly what I used to do on that. I can do on this with, this with a prime, or, grab this and I have even more zoom range. And there's a lot of versatile options out there. And I really I value compactness. So I think where you'll see my collection go in the future is more compactness, some 1-inch sensor compacts. I want to look at what do I want to get between the RX100, the G7X Mark II or 3, and possibly the ZV series as well. Out of those 1-inch sensor compacts, what do I want to look at as kind of a bring anywhere camera? Because I have the Canon and I have the Olympus, which is pretty small, but I want something that's truly pocketable, but still has a fast, good performing lens, a decent 1-inch sensor. I'm cool with 1-inch sensor for daily use, and that'll probably be the next thing that I'm looking at. That's kind of the state of the collection. So I appreciate you guys watching, and I hope that you guys enjoyed this content. I'm kind of flipping back and forth between different things right now. So if you like the watch content or the camera content, just let me know in the comments, and I'll try to see what everybody thinks. Like and subscribe, and I really appreciate you guys checking this out. Have a great day.